You're about to enter the most electrifying NFL talk show you have ever experienced. From up-to-the-minute news and notes to... who am I kidding?
It's a wrap. Let's try this.
It's the After Further Review podcast with Conor Forrest. Want to get involved? Send us an email to mailbag@conorforrest.com for your questions to be read on air.
Okay, here we go. 5, 6, 5.
And now, broadcasting from the great Commonwealth of Virginia.
0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour.
Here's your host, Conor Forrest.
Shawn, how are you, my friend? It is good to see your face. Look at you. There you are.
There I am.
There we are. Look at the camera over here. And the camera over here. We're doing this again. We're doing this again. Welcome back, everybody. After Further Review returns. It is Thursday, April 20th, the year of our Lord, 2023. We are 7 days away from the Carolina Panthers being on the clock for the number one overall pick, Shawnee. I always feel like the draft takes a turn. I'm trying to whack around my microphone here. I always feel like the draft, there's just that point from, it's like mid-February, like right after the Super Bowl, to now that just takes eternity.
Right.
It just takes eternity, and I'm just glad. I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we're finally here. How are you?
I'm doing well, man.
It's great to see you. You don't know the difference between a Coke and a Diet Coke.
Apparently, I don't.
So
So let me bring up this conversation.
Let's just get this off our chest.
All right. So my girlfriend's joining us in the
That's right, we
studio
have a
today.
studio
Hi,
audience.
Claire. She
Oh,
doesn't
single.
want to be mentioned though, or be on the show, so
No.
she's hiding. But I told her to make herself useful and go get us some Coke Zeros, which is a terrible thing to tell
the
your
most
girlfriend.
condescending thing you could possibly say.
Although she said that to me before, so it's like
You've said that to me before.
have I said make yourself useful?
100% positive.
Maybe when
you
we were
have.
setting up equipment.
We probably were.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
probably were.
no hard feelings. But you ended up getting the Coke Zeros, which I was kidding. I didn't actually want her to make herself useful. That was a joke. She said it to me before, so it's an inside thing. But she got the Coke Zero, Coke Zero sugar, whatever that means. And she wanted to try it and was like, is it different than Diet Coke? Which then I said, well, aren't they kind of the same thing?
Yeah, I
isn't
wanted
it
to
just
rip
like
my headphones off and stomp on them.
Is it? But I thought it was a marketing thing. Like now you got two separate drinks that are essentially the same thing.
No, it's just very incorrect.
Okay.
I promise. So you ready for this?
Yeah.
I'm such an aficionado when it comes to Coke Zero. They upped or like redid their marketing. So as you see here, you got the red can and the black lettering. Before, it was a black can with white lettering. And so they did this new kind of rollout with the brand, with the color, and then they said it's a new and improved formula. I was able to tell the difference between the old Coke Zero and the new Coke Zero. Now, for anyone who's a Coke Zero fan, you can 100% tell the difference between Coke Zero and Diet Coke. Right? Diet Coke came
Really?
out- So Diet Coke came out before there's a craze right now with diet sodas, right? It's a super popular thing. It's a really every soda out there has now a zero, right? A Mountain Dew Zero, a Dr. Pepper Zero, all sorts of different things like that. Coke Zero came out and basically revamped Diet Coke's formula. Diet Coke, like I said, before this era of diet sodas, has like this chemically taste.
Right. Yeah.
Coke Zero has way more of that cola flavor and very little of that like weird chemically fake taste that you'd otherwise get with like a Diet Coke or a Diet Pepsi. Diet Pepsi might be the worst thing on the planet. It just might be.
What's the ingredient difference though between a Diet Coke and a Coke
it's just
Zero?
the formula. I don't think there's any ingredient. I think it's just the way they've just perfected that.
Like, does this have Splenda or not? I mean, I guess it
Nope,
wouldn't be
it's
Splenda.
an aspartame. That's the sweetener, right?
Okay.
But yeah, it is a very different thing. It is a very different thing.
Okay.
The fact that you didn't know the difference was upsetting to me.
Well, I don't sit there and, but maybe that's what we'll do
should.
next episode. We'll have these, and I'll bring some Diet Cokes, and we'll just cans. Though we got to keep it like an even.
We
like,
should
we'll
keep
do
it
cans.
even.
We won't go
I
to
like
McDonald's or anything. We'll just do cans. Keep it easy.
I
keep
do
it
like
simple.
that romantic bit that you do with me, where you always bring me a large fountain Coke from McDonald's.
I do. Yeah,
all
I've
the
done
time.
that before.
It's one of my favorite things on the planet. One of my absolute favorite things on the planet. But anything new with you? How has life been? Last 7 days? Anything crazy? We did the episode here last week. We have a special guest on the show today. I recorded in conversation with Ian Cummings on Tuesday because it's draft time. So it's time for Ian to jump on the show. So we're going to get to that a little bit later in the show. We're going to touch up on some breaking news, and Pug enters the studio as well. It's the ambiance of a young family's home anytime we hit the record button. Routinely what happens in the house is that it's dead quiet. And then you hit the record button, and suddenly upstairs, it's Nagasaki. And it's just bombs going off, and just everyone's collapsing. Pug does the Harlem Shake in the studio. So we're going to get to Ian a little bit later on in the show. I want to get to this Jalen Hurts contract. Jalen Hurts signs a historic contract. There's Pug right underneath. Now, you can't see in the cameras. Pug usually comes in here. He's looking for all sorts of attention. But just this past week, really quietly, Shawn, Jalen Hurts all of a sudden sets himself a record. It's the highest guaranteed money in a contract in NFL history, negotiated by his agent. This was super quiet. Did you see this happening, or am I on an island or something? Like, did you see this happening?
I mean, we never talked about the need for him to get a contract. It's all been Aaron Rodgers or Lamar Jackson.
Well, we talked about him needing a contract, but I wasn't quite sure like when that would get done. And
right.
Obviously, the sooner the better, right?
But it wasn't a pressing offseason issue.
It's not. It wasn't on the Lamar Jackson side of things, right? NFL Network. Here's NFL Network on the Jalen Hurts huge contract extension.
A new highest paid player in NFL history, and he is also the starting quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles. It is all about Jalen Hurts today, agreement in terms on a 5-year, $255 million contract, which is massive because it means on an average per year basis, he is now the highest paid player in the NFL at $51 million per year. $51 million per year for the Super Bowl quarterback, Jalen Hurts. As far as some of the other details, Tom, $179.3 million in guarantees. Overall, including injury guarantees, $110 million fully guaranteed just for signing his name. And actually, in his signing bonus, he gets $23.3 million. This is all through 2028. So Jalen Hurts locked up for the foreseeable future for the Philadelphia Eagles, and no doubt about it, based on his performance the last couple of years, he has earned every bit of it. Also earned the first no-trade clause in team history, which is a huge, huge deal. And if he plays, basically like he has been, he can get an additional $15 million in incentives. So yes, Tom, today is a very, very good day to be Jalen Hurts.
Certainly a good day to be Jalen Hurts. Pretty darn good day to be an Eagles fan.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on this?
I like contracts like this a lot better than like the 13 or 10-year ones, because we're seeing it all across sports, not just in football. You get these guys who have to show some sort of experience. They're not rookies. They're not first-year players, second-year players or anything. They have some experience, and then they come in and they're like 25, 26, 27 years old, whatever they are, and they start requesting these 13, 14, 15-year contracts. I think Mahomes was a 13-year contract, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it was 10.
It was 10, right.
Yeah, 13's entering the baseball category.
It is. Well, yeah, that's the problem in baseball.
I don't think there's ever been I think Patrick Mahomes...
Is his the longest?
The longest, yeah, because there's a lot of like the NFLPA and...
Right. Well, baseball is one that's...
well, they have deferred payments in baseball, so
right.
they can sit there and make the contracts... 25 years with deferred payments or something like that.
But I like these better because I think it's less risky for the team in terms of injuries. Yeah. Like, what if 4 years down the line, Jalen Hurts has a catastrophic knee injury, and all of a sudden you have him for another 7 years on your contract if you were to do this long-term contract deal? But in this situation, you only have him for 5 years. So it makes a lot more sense where it's not as risky and the player's getting his money. So it's kind of a win-win.
Totally. And I'm going to pull this up on Spot Track and see if I can get, because here we go. See if I can get some numbers for you. For his, it doesn't look like they've updated the years in terms of the cap hit, but from my understanding, Shawn, if you can try to pull that up, his cap number over the course of the next few years, because how it was negotiated. First of all, from an agent standpoint, what a win! I mean, what an agent Jalen Hurts has. I mean, incredible. Her name I need to find as well. She negotiated a historic contract, so really all kudos to her. But the way that this was structured actually is pretty team friendly in terms of cap for the next few years.
It's $4.789 million.
Right. So that's obviously his rookie contract. So that's not going to kick in until his rookie contract expires. Right. Now that number is going to sky high jump. But if I'm not mistaken, I think his cap number for at least 2 years after this year is going to be pretty reasonable. It's in the 30s or something along that line, which is really well negotiated for the team. Now, obviously, as you get further into the contract, you're going to get, it's going to hamper their ability to do much in 3 or 4 years. Mm-hmm. That said, the Eagles can run it back if they want to, right? They've got a lot of draft picks this year, and they're not forking over a ton of money. Again, that is the gold standard in football right now. It's that young quarterback on a rookie contract. It's the gold standard because you can build a team around it. I mean, it's the funny thing with Carson Wentz making $28.5 million last year. Please, it hurts. Last year and this year, I don't think Sam Howell's making more than I think $500,000-$600,000. It's something crazy, something ridiculous. I have to pull up the exact number. But you get the point, right? You get the point. I mean, that's how you build teams. Quarterbacks that are elite, young, and cheap, where you can build your roster up around them. That said, when you find it, you got to keep it, right? The Josh Allen contracts, the Patrick Mahomes contracts, these kind of things, and now Jalen Hurts, obviously setting the record. You can't let guys like that go. Hit the open market. You got to pay them, and this is the cost of it right now.
So let me ask you this. Do you like contracts like this better where it is more money per year but a shorter term, or do you like the long-term Patrick Mahomes style contracts?
It just depends on the player completely.
Well, let's say for a scrambling quarterback. Somebody who's prone to be injured.
Well, if you're hinting at Lamar Jackson style or
even Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes.
Jalen Hurts is a guy who can use his legs, but I mean, I wouldn't consider, he's an incredible pocket passer. Right. I mean, he's proven the ability, so I would give Jalen Hurts this contract without even blinking if I could. Patrick Mahomes, do we consider him a scrambling quarterback? Like, he moves and he can, but he's not particularly fast. He's an elite athlete who can make stuff happen with his legs, but I wouldn't consider him, Lamar Jackson is a top tier NFL quarterback. He also, if he just decided to play running back, would be a top tier NFL running back, right? So it's different physical traits. And Lamar Jackson is a great pocket passer, but I put Jalen Hurts, so far at least above him in that category.
Would you be comfortable giving Josh Allen a huge contract?
Yeah, totally. He's physically built, and I still would like to coach the please don't lower your shoulder into a linebacker kind of thing. But he's just built stronger, and he doesn't have a deep injury history, and that's his style, and it's worked out well. So yeah, completely. Okay. This brings me though, when I did see this news, it completely took me right back to the Lamar conversation we had of Jalen Hurts got a guaranteed $179. There was a report that came out that in September of 2022, this past September, Lamar was offered $200 million guaranteed. I don't know if that's a legit number or not. I'm not sure. Here's what I'll say, though. It further highlights and proves to me, and it's so unbelievably frustrating, that Lamar Jackson doesn't have an agent, one, and two, doesn't realize that using the Deshaun Watson contract as leverage for him for some reason, it's not a good move. Like the Browns has made a historic, I think, mistake in giving Deshaun Watson that much guaranteed money. And I think the league knows that. I think fans know that. I think the team knows that. And I just think using that as leverage to try to get as much guaranteed money as you can, like, Jalen Hurts, who clearly deserves his contract, got $20 million less than what you reportedly denied in guarantees. This is why you have an agent. This is why you have an agent. It's clear cut. And quite frankly, I'm not quite sure. I don't know what the path for Lamar here is. I think he plays this year under the franchise tag, and I think he probably gives us another swing next year for a long-term deal. But I think he just misplayed it. I think he misplayed this offseason bad, and this Jalen Hurts contract, I think, highlights that in a way.
Are you saying he's overvaluating himself?
Yes, completely.
Okay.
Completely and utterly overvaluing himself. And your job is to do that. But also in the parameters, that's why you have an agent. You have an agency that can take you and say, okay, we're going to, look, these guys are NFL quarterbacks. You don't get to that point without overvaluating yourself, without the confidence of, hey, I'm worth this. That's how you get there. But you
have to have an agent to do it, is what you're saying.
You have to have an agent to be able to help negotiate on your behalf. In like I said, we had said a couple weeks ago, manipulating the media, working narratives, things like that agents do that go way beyond what people think they do. Pinning teams against each other I'm very frustrated with, like, and it's funny because I don't have any stake in the game, but it's frustrating to see a guy like Lamar just kind of make these missteps, and looking at teams around the league. Yeah, I don't know what that is. It sounded like somebody's conjuring a demon up there. But looking at teams around the league make their moves with their young quarterbacks and them find a way to mutually, get a deal that works for both. So, I'm going to stick with my original talking point that Lamar stays in Baltimore.
Okay.
He plays under the tag, but we'll kind of see how that goes on. There's just been no real talk, from the Ravens or anything to do with contract negotiations there. I think those have sailed for the most part because the team has all the leverage.
Right. All right. I got a quick one for you.
Go ahead.
All right. Do you believe Tua when he says in a recent press conference that he considered retirement?
Yeah, completely.
You do believe him?
Totally.
Okay.
I mean, by the way, you'd be dumb if you don't, or you wouldn't after having, multiple concussions in a year that were not small. Yeah, totally. I totally believe him. That's up to him, right? And I think that's the other thing that, like, a lot of people want to do he should, or I'm going to mandate what somebody does with their career. And it's like, well, that's up to him. But of course you got to consider that. And he's got a family. I believe he has children too. So it's like you have a lot to consider there in that category. But that's interesting. Yeah, I did see that quote.
Yeah, he did say that. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Totally believe him there. But Jalen Hurts is just an all-star. He's just an all-star guy. I love Jalen Hurts. I mean, it stinks that he's on Philly because I just can't cheer for him. I can't bring myself to cheer for anything Philadelphia. But what a tremendous, tremendous professional he is. I mean, a guy who handles himself with such incredible class and had one of a historic performance in the Super Bowl last year. The reason they lost was Pat Mahomes and ran into a meat grinder that the Chiefs are. But he's just tremendous. And I think I realized that I was a Jalen Hurts fan. Was it the 2018 or 19 national championship game he was benched in? I think it was 2018. He was benched for Tua at halftime of the national championship game. And after the game, just a consummate professional. Just no eyeball emojis on Twitter. No, I'm gonna, go on Instagram and post something on my story that's cryptic or he's just a really well structured young professional who I think is gonna find success in this league for years to come. Hopefully it's somewhere else in Philly after the contract, but it's one of those things where, like, these contracts are signed and it's like, I have to deal with him for another 5 years. So congrats to Jalen Hurts and you Eagles fans out there. Before we go to Ian, Shawn, do you have any immediate thoughts on the draft that you want to share?
that I want to share.
I always want to give you a chance. I know you're not a big draft guy.
I'm not. I really am not.
You're not a huge draft guy. I love the draft. I said it in our conversation with Ian. This is probably the least prepared I've been for a draft, but I'm so excited. I just love the draft. It's so much fun, and Ian from the Draft Network is fantastic. He breaks down all you need to know. We threw it back to an episode that we recorded with him last year. He made a prediction last year that I think is going to stick this year, so we'll talk about that. We go into the quarterbacks, we go into offensive linemen, we go into. Ian's just great. I could let him talk and just go on forever, but he's just tremendous. So we're going to get to Ian now, and we'll come back on the other side. So Ian Cummings from the Draft Network joins after further review. We will catch you guys back on the other side of the interview. And I am pleased to be joined, as always. It is April, so it's that time where I slide into Ian Cummings' DMs and I just bother the living hell out of him. It's just that time, Ian, when you're the most busy doing something, and all you need is a desperate break from this thing that you're doing, and then I come in and I'm like, hey, dude, let's do more of the thing that you're just endlessly doing. So I'd like to formally apologize, but Ian Cummings of Pro Football Network joins us. You can find him and his work at profootballnetwork.com. His latest piece is up today. It's the 18th. That's when we're recording the interview, but it is up today. Breaks down the top 10 edge rushers in the 2023 draft. You can follow him at Twitter at IC_draft. Dang, Ian, you got rid of the Ian_Cummings_. That's such a bummer.
Man. It was, I know, man. It was tough to see it go. That was a lot of history with that one. That was the one I started with. So, big backstory behind the 9. It's my favorite. It was my favorite number. I don't know why. That's the extent of the backstory behind that. But I don't have a favorite number now. I just kind of go with the punches. But yeah, I wanted to align it with the branding, right? So IC_draft, just NFL draft, but specializing there. But yeah, it was time for a change. And you mentioned it, man. Draft season. As much as I would want to break at this point, it's been droning on for so long. But at this point too, there's a silver lining. Most of the work is already done. Most of the scouting is already done. There's a few guys that I want to watch back, rewatch a little bit more of, but for the most part, the board is set, right? So it's not any new discovery now. It's just kind of talking about what you've already seen and discovered about these guys. So honestly, just staying the course until next Thursday when, all of our expectations, what we thought, it's going to fly in the face of that too. You never know what's going to happen, but it's a fun time of year. Excited to be here, and I'm always happy to be on with you, man. I feel like it's been forever, but it was too long. It was too long, basically.
It's always too long. It's always too long, but it's so good to catch up with you. So you've been with Pro Football Network for how long now?
It's been, I was there part-time for a little bit when I was still fan-sided. I was a contractor at that point and started as an editor. I think this is my second draft cycle as a full-time NFL draft analyst. So, second cycle. I'd say maybe 3 or 4 years total. But, yeah, it's been fun. I was there. I started in college and graduated college with a marketing degree. But here we are covering the NFL draft. And, just kind of a lot of tape watching, a lot of film watching, that's for sure. That's kind of the foundation of it. But it's been fun. It's been fun. So
I can imagine. I'd have to imagine you just cannot wait for next Thursday. You just can't wait for this thing to just be over and just and I just loved how last year it was and the year before. It's like once this draft ends, like your work doesn't stop because more drafts are to come. So
I've already got. I wish I could show you my spreadsheet. I've already got a watch list of about 500 guys for the next cycle. So, and I just did a 2024 mock 3-rounder. So it's we always have to look ahead. Man. I swear it's
incredible.
It's crazy. Yeah, but hey, if you're not looking ahead, you're behind. That's what I say. No, it's not that bad. But you want to make sure that you maintain an awareness of the next class and guys that you need to watch, right? You always want to be prepared. So it never ends. But you try and find little breaks when you can, right? So I'll definitely be taking a little vacation in May, going to my buddies in Wisconsin. I'll be taking. I need to use a minimum vacation time amount. I don't know what it is. I have to check, but I know I have to use a certain amount. So we'll get it in there somehow. Yeah,
you got to get it taken care of. Now I know your typical things you enjoy the most in your time off. You're a tennis player, don't you play tennis? You're a tennis guy. No injuries recently, right? Because I believe the last time I had you on, you had an ankle situation, I believe it was.
No, I maybe like tweaked it, but I've never more than tweaked it. Which is weird because my strategy in tennis is I just run and jump at everything, right? So it's like because I can't aim, so that's what I defer to. But I do that. That's something I do. Yeah, I think music sometimes, just for fun a little bit. But I need to definitely. You need ways to decompress, especially when the work is just coming in on a conveyor belt, man. It's just for sure.
I can imagine, dude. I can imagine. And with that, I'm going to proceed to now just load you up with the questions that you've done nothing but answer. But I want to start our conversation with this, and I want you to take a listen to this because I'm going to throw it back to almost 365 days ago. Okay, I want you to take a listen to this. Mm-hmm. I appreciate you being here as always, and we'll get you on again anytime you want to come talk bagels, which we tend to do, and draft football. You're always welcome on.
Yes, sir. And I always appreciate it. By the way, 2023, CJ Stroud, QB1. My early QB1. Bryce Young's up there.
Already, we're there.
Dude, already. We're going. But yeah, I mean, if you don't want a QB this year, I'm sure there'll be some options next year.
That was you last year. Now, we did, I believe last year I believe the conversation, we had started talking about bagels. We had about a 10 or 15 minute bagel conversation.
It's an important discussion topic, man. I swear.
Well, it is actually.
By the way, Hawaiian bagels are still tops for me. I gotta say, Hawaiian bagels and butter. That's
tremendous. Yeah, I mean, I know that everything bagel. I mean, the Panera. Look at us. We're literally just
rehashing last year's episode.
Right out. But I think that Panera Asiago cheese bagel with about 6 inches of cream cheese is just. I'm going to pass away soon.
Sounds good.
Have a particular, and it's going to be because of those.
Hey, we all pass away at some point, right? Why not go in style?
I'll willingly succumb to that. There will be no pallbearers, though. I will be on wheels. But to that piece of audio, you said at that time, CJ Stroud, QB1, 2023. Right here, are you sticking with that?
Well, the bad move to do would be to say, of course I am, right? Because I picked a hill to die on, so I'm going to die on it, right? No, I'm not going to do that. It's at this point, it's very, very close. And I'll be honest with you, I need to really take a step back and kind of finalize who my QB1 is because it is very close on my board. I have 3 guys that are graded within, I think, 0.1 of each other, which is really close on my grading scale. CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Bryce Young. I mean, those 3 are neck and neck and neck. I mean, they're insanely close together, and they all provide different areas of appeal. I think for me, Bryce Young has the highest floor. He's kind of the highest floor guy. Anthony Richardson, the highest ceiling. That goes without saying. I think Stroud provides the best mix of both elements with his profile. You look at the size, right? That's something that Young doesn't have, and it's not something that I knock Young too much for. But it's right if they're this close together, it can be a separating factor. So he's got that frame. He's a good athlete. I think in that Georgia game especially, he showed that he does have creative capacity, right? He could be a little more comfortable creating off script, but he has that ability. With other quarterbacks who've struggled against pressure, sometimes it's because they're not mobile enough. That's not the issue with Stroud. So that's why I think, I'm a little more confident in his growth potential there. Off script, he's got arm strength. He's got arm elasticity. He's the most accurate and precise quarterback in this draft. The ball placement is uncanny. And he's very smart too. He processes well. He can anticipate over the middle of the field. So, I love a lot of what Stroud has to offer. But Richardson and Young are both very good prospects too. I think Richardson, the upside speaks for itself with him. High-level athlete, rocket for an arm. For a young quarterback who's only got like 13 starts under his belt, right? He's shown that he can navigate the pocket, kind of keep himself upright, keeps eyes downfield, read the field. Again, he can also anticipate over the middle of the field. He's flashed that ability. So I like the building blocks that he has to offer. And then Bryce Young, staying controlled amidst chaos, one of the best things that he can do. He's got great mobility too, but also feel under pressure, right? The ability to stay composed and, keep plays alive and put the team on his back when they need it. Another guy who processes very well off script. His eyes are always moving. So he's got an elastic arm too. I think of those 3, he has the weakest arm, right? So that's why for me, I'm not sure if he's going to be my QB1, but he's another guy who's just, size aside. I think he has the tools. He's a big outlier with that size, but I think he can counteract it and be the exception. So all three of those guys are very close to my board, and I've flip-flopped between Richardson and Stroud for a while now. I'm not sure which one will be my QB1. The thing with Richardson is, if he has the upside that he has, and if you're confident in his mental capacity, right, the processing capacity, then there's no reason not to have QB1 because you need to shoot for the stars in the NFL. So it'll be one of those guys. It will be one of those guys. I don't know which one yet, but it's very close. But so it could be Stroud, and ultimately if I feel like, kind of patting myself on the back from a year ago, I'll go, yeah, Stroud. But no, I mean, the draft process is always, you got to stay open. You got to keep an open mind to reevaluation. And so this cycle has been very important for that. But these guys are very close together, and it's gonna suck because one of them is gonna have to be QB3. It's like I like him a lot, man. He's my QB3, but hey, that's not a bad thing in this class. There's a lot of talent up top.
Yep. And I mean that is the conversation, right? When you get to Carolina and Houston at 1 and 2 is what is freedom, right? Freedom is the ability to make a bunch of really good choices where you don't really have, it's kind of a win-win no matter who you go with. I give you $100 and I have to you got to put that $100 on somebody that Carolina are going to put on that card at this moment in time. Which of those three in your mind goes to Frank Reich's Panthers at 1?
That's a tough one, man, because it has been back and forth. I mean, a couple weeks ago, you could have, people basically thought it was Stroud, right? Then, all of a sudden it's Young, and the odds are flipping too, like an insane amount. I forgot what the amount was, but now people are saying it's basically Young, like the decision's already made. But then Scott Fitter is like, we haven't made the decision yet. We got to go back to Frank Reich. I haven't talked to Frank about it. We haven't locked it in. So it's like, oh my God, what is it going to be? To me, it feels a lot like the 2018 class, which had Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold and Josh Allen. I remember going up to the final day in that one, the day of, they're like, oh, it's going to be Sam Darnold. And then it was Baker Mayfield, right? So it's like, we have no idea what's going to happen. And we have no idea what is smoke and what is real. And that is why, me personally, I'm content sitting back and watching what happens. If I don't have to bet, I'm not going to bet. But if you give me $100 and say you have to bet, we're forcing you to, then it's tough. I'm going to go with, again, it's tough because Frank Reich he's always adhered to a typical prototype at QB, right? You usually don't see him taking undersized guys. He usually likes guys that are at least 6'2", 6'3", over 210, 220. Yeah, that prototypical QB frame, right? That's kind of what Reich has generally preferred. Richardson and Stroud fit that mold. Bryce Young doesn't, right? So that ideally that would help you narrow down the options a little bit, but then now we're seeing the reports that it is Young, right? And I think I saw a report, the S2 testing, the cognitive testing, that's been a big storyline this offseason. And we know that Young had the highest score in the entire class. I think he had like a 98, right? And the Panthers are one front office, one organization that does put a lot of value into that, right? Now, Richardson scored very high too, and that's important as well. Richardson has his tools are head and shoulders above Young's. So, ideally, I would keep Richardson in the running for that reason. But with all the smoke pointing toward Young, man, I don't know because we've heard that the Texans really like Young too, and we've heard that the Panthers were open to trading down from number 1 potentially. So are they trying to force the Texans' hand into trading up to get their guy, right? We have no idea. I have no idea. That's the frustrating part, man. It's like, I could tell you a ton of stuff about all the prospects down the board, but if you ask me about this, I have no idea. I don't know. But I think if I had to bet $100, if I had to, man, peer pressure is a tough thing. I'm going to go with Bryce Young at this moment, just because I feel like there's too much smoke, and I think the S2 testing does hold weight, and we've heard time and time again, that Young is just, size. You can knock his size, you can knock his arm strength. He's just that guy, right? Kind of similar to Joe Burrow when he was coming out. He didn't have the strongest arm, but he was just that guy, right? And he showed up on the film. He led his team to win it. Bryce Young on film, against Texas, against other teams like that. He just wills his team to win, even amidst adversity. So, it's tough. It's going to be a close call, I think. But if I had to choose, I'd probably go with Young.
I like that. Yeah, I mean, and here's the good news. It's the $100 that I gave you, so it's house money, right?
Okay.
Don't worry about it. It's not coming out of your savings account. You don't have to shatter the piggy bank. Where does some other quarterbacks fit in, right? Like the Hendon Hookers, the conversation is kind of funny how the Stetson Bennett conversation has really intrigued me. But, if you could go through just a couple of those guys briefly, like where did they slot in this conversation?
Yeah, well, fourth is Will Levis, pretty safely. He's my fourth guy. He's got the size, the arm talent. He's got all the tools. Again, it's just a matter of he's a little bit older than Richardson. So it's one of those things where Richardson's developmental runway is a little bit longer. You got more time to work with. Levis had a couple of years in Kentucky, didn't quite show the linear progression that you're looking for, right? So, but at the same time, we know he's very book smart off the field. We know that he has the mental capacity to work with, right? So he's a tough competitor. So he's my fourth guy. Phenomenal arm talent, a lot of stuff to work with. Hendon Hooker, I feel like there's a very, very big gap between Levis and the next guy up. I'll say that. Hendon Hooker has an early day 3 for me. I'm not a fan of the round 1 talk for him. The production was great. Don't get me wrong. He was very productive at the college level. All the reports say that he's a great leader. He's got great character. But I just don't know how translatable his play style is. That Tennessee offense, you got Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman and stacked alignments, right? They're manufacturing a lot of space in the defense, right? And it's also a lot of one-read throws for Hooker where he's not having to stand in the pocket, survey, keep the clock running, So when he did have to keep his internal clock running and actually go from progression to progression, very inconsistent. There were times where, he dropped his eyes or froze up, So I don't know how well he's going to translate to a traditional NFL system. He's got good mobility. He's got good arm talent, not elite in either area. And I think that the what's the word I'm looking for? How tough it's going to be to translate from that offense, especially being a 25-year-old rookie, right? People talk about the knee injury. That doesn't really concern me. I don't, because he suffered it in November. He should be good to go by the time the regular season comes along. Maybe it'll impact his preseason, his training camp a little bit, but I'm more concerned about how he translates from that offense, especially being as old as he is. He might be set in his ways mentally. So, I have an early day 3 on him. I think he could be a solid backup spot starter, but that's kind of where he levels out for me. Some other guys that I do like on day 3, Jay Conor from Fresno State is one guy. He's a little bit smaller, but he's tough as nails. He's a great competitor. He's actually got pretty good arm talent for his size, not elite again, but he can layer the ball with velocity into intermediate windows. I love that ability on his tape. He can navigate the pocket. He does have some creation capacity. So he's a fun one. Clayton Tune from Houston is another one. He actually tested very well. I think he was around 6'3", I want to say 215, 220, ran a 4.6 40 around there, had a 37-inch vertical. So he's actually a really good athlete for his size that shows up on tape at times. He can create, he can extend plays. And he's a gunslinger, man. Playing with Tank Dell at Houston, they put up massive numbers. And Clayton Tune is one guy who's willing to stand in. He's willing to test windows deep. He's willing to, challenge defensive backs. And, he's got enough arm to make it work, too. The tools are not elite with those guys. And that's kind of what reserves them in that day 3 range. But, if you're looking for a guy, hey, we got to start at Washington with Kirk Cousins, round 4. If you're looking for a guy who can maybe on day 3, if he gets it that shot, he can make it work. Clayton Tune and Jay Conor are 2 guys that stand out to me. But, you talk about this QB class. Some QB classes have really defined tiers. Like you got your round 1 guys, your day 2 guys, your day 3 guys. This one, for me, on my board, it's more like round 1 and then just day 3, right? Like Hendon Hooker is going to go way earlier than he should, in my opinion. I do think there's a really big gap between those first 4.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And anytime I always, my heart just warms anytime I hear you say Kirk Cousins, because me and you love Kirk Cousins tremendously with all our hearts. So
he was what got me into football, man. I swear. I lived 15 minutes away from East Lansing. So, hey, go green, go white, right?
I'm telling you, and I've said this before so many times, but I have taken on, it's that scene from like 300 or Troy, right? Where you got the one Spartan just holding up the spear, and you've just got a crusade of people on their way to murder you. And that's just me against Twitter when it came to Kirk Cousins and me just defending him religiously, because I just love him so tremendously. It just brings me so much happiness. But I want, because I feel like what happens in so many of these conversations about best players in the draft, we and rightfully so, we get hooked on that positional value conversation. I want you to kind of tell me, in your eyes, who the best player is in this draft, removing positional value. So if you were to take away that, obviously that quarterback is always the highest. But talk to me about guys, your favorite guy, and it could be a quarterback, but your favorite guy in this draft, the best player in this draft, regardless of positional value. What do you have?
Regardless of positional value, well, that's easy. Bijan Robinson. And that's the tough part, right? Because he's a running back. So if you input positional value, which you're going to, right, that always is inputted. He's not going to be your top guy, and so he'll be below Will Anderson for me. He might be below the quarterbacks for me just because he's a running back. But when you're talking about raw film grade, Bijan has my highest raw film grade, and he actually has a decent amount above Will Anderson, and that's not a slight to Anderson. Anderson is in the elite range for me. He's one of just 3 players that have raw film grades in the elite range. It's Bijan, Will Anderson, and Jalen Carter. But Bijan Robinson he's incredible. I think he is as close to a generational running back prospect that you were going to get. 5'11", 215. Very good athletic tester, right? Which I think that was more just confirmation of what we've seen on tape. But he's explosive, insanely agile for his size. I mean, the way that he can change directions and just adjust his angles at a moment's notice. And the analogy that I like to use is that not really an analogy, but it's just a nice phrase to use, is that he's a master of space. I mean, in short spaces, his ability to control defenders, right, set them up and control them and capitalize is second to none. He's got such an enticing mix of short area agility, athleticism, and then contact balance to churn through contact, physicality, and then the vision, creative instincts to keep himself up, right? It's just that the combination of tools that he has is so complete and so dominating. I don't see a scenario where he's not going to become a phenomenal running back. And that Texas offensive line was not always great, paving lanes for him, right? And he, time and time again, he proved that he could create for himself at a very high level. And then on top of that, he's a phenomenal receiver too. I mean, you'll see him run routes down the sideline. He'll adjust in midair for passes. He's got great contortion ability, body control. He can extend beyond his frame. You really can't poke holes in Bijan's game. I mean, I hate to say that because it sounds like hyperbole, right? But totally. One of my biggest knocks coming out of the summer was that maybe he doesn't have breakaway speed, like not even like bad speed, just like not 4.3 speed. And he still ran like a 4.47. So it's like, that's not going to be a weakness for you. So Bijan to me is very complete. I'm a huge fan of his profile. Would I take him top 10? I think it ultimately depends on where your team is at, what position you're in. If you're in a position where you can spend on that luxury, the Eagles at number 10 could maybe be in that situation where, hey, our roster is good enough. Let's take Bijan and let's, reestablish talent in the other areas later on. But, if you have needs at premier positions elsewhere, I'd probably lean that way. But mid to late first round, especially, right, I can definitely see Bijan settling there. But he's a phenomenal player. Will Anderson is close behind him. I think Anderson is, again, a phenomenal player, explosive, insane lateral athleticism. I mean, this is a guy who's 6'3.5", 255 pounds, I think 34-inch arms, and he's, so dangerous stunting laterally, but also working around the apex. He's got incredible power capacity and strength at the point of attack, and his motor is insanely hot. I mean, this guy never takes a beat off, and that's what I love about his game. I mean, even when he makes contact, and even when it's a little congested, his hands are always moving. Insanely combative player. He doesn't rest until he hits the quarterback. So big fan of both those guys. Those are my top 2, but my best overall player is Bijan. I think if you take away positional value, he's definitely, he's one of a kind.
Do you have a pro comparison? I mean, I remember I remember going back to the Saquon conversation to him out of Penn State as being a generational talent. I mean, do you have a pro comparison for Bijan Robinson, a guy that you think just emulates his game?
Mm-hmm. I do not actually. I wanted to find one. I really did. Comparisons for me as a draft analyst, if I have one that I really like, I'll use it, right? Like some of my wide receiver ones. Cedric Tillman from Tennessee. Michael Pittman Jr. is my comp for him. Santana Moss is my comp for Zay Flowers. So I think, so it's like if I have one that I really like, right? And for me, comps is like, testing numbers matter, right? Size matters. You need to have very similar size parameters. But even more than that, just watching the film, do they move the same way? Do they kind of bend the same way, right? So things like that, really little things. Their foot speed, are their stride frequencies similar, right? Like one guy might two guys might be like 6'2", 200, but one is a guy with super fast strides. The other one's lumbering a little bit, right? Stylistically, I need you to be very, very similar, right? So it's something that I nitpick. I kind of scrutinize really a lot, right? So with running backs, Bijan is a very unique mold because he's 5'11", 215. He's got that workhorse size, but then he's just so quick and agile and flexible for his size on his cuts. It's just you don't really see a blend of traits like that, right? So I think Saquon was a little bit more. I think Saquon was a little bit more, freak athlete over efficient runner coming out. There were times where he danced around a little too much in the backfield, right? Bijan, in my opinion, really blends together that efficiency, right? But he's also very good at working downhill and staying in control all through the rep. I think Saquon was a little bit more just this guy is insanely explosive, insanely strong. Bijan is too, not quite to the degree that Saquon was, but I think Bijan makes up for it where he's a better runner. Saquon was a better prospect, your athlete, but Bijan's a better runner. So I think a comp for Bijan is tough, man. I've seen LaDainian Tomlinson as a comp for him too, which I think the dual-sided receiving and running ability, there could be something there. I think Tomlinson may be a little bit more explosive again, but Bijan isn't a slouch in the athletic department, so it's tough. I don't have a comp for him right now. Maybe I'll explore it a little bit more if I have time before the draft, but sure. It's one of those things. If I have one, I use it. If I don't force it. You just try to convey what the prospect does as best as you can.
You think he's in play at 16 for Washington, and do you think that is a realistic move that – look, for the Commanders, at least for me, it's corner, it's tackle, and then there's a big drop off in terms of what our priority should be at 16. But say Robinson shows up at 16 there. Do you think that's a realistic thing? And do you think that would be a smart move?
It could be a realistic thing. It's tough for Washington because they just drafted Brian Robinson last year, and they still have Antonio Gibson, right, who hasn't been super efficient always as a runner, but I still think this is a guy who does have a lot of running and receiving upside. The versatility is there. I think if you can unlock it, right? So, those two guys, not a world-beating running back combination, but if you have a good offensive front in front of them, they can make things happen, I feel like. I think Brian Robinson, especially, for me, was one of the better north-south backs in the 2022 NFL draft. He was a guy who, to me, had the size and physicality to work downhill very well. The leg churn through contact was very strong with him. And I think that, that ability, to keep churning through the chains, right? That's one of those things where, he can do that very well. So I think you have a physical puncher right up front with Brian Robinson. You have a guy who could be a nice change of pace, kind of a versatile weapon in Gibson. So I'm not sure how much of a need it is right now. Bijan would be a massive upgrade over both guys, right? Don't get me wrong. And that's not a slouch to them because I did really like Brian Robinson last cycle. I like the upside with Gibson. Bijan is just a different beast, right? But, if you're Washington, if you're at 16 and say Darnell Wright from Tennessee is there, right tackle, or, maybe I'm a big fan of Anton Harrison from Oklahoma. I would draft him and maybe move him to the right side, right? Just get that talent in there. But if there's a high-level offensive lineman still there, that would maybe be the more prudent move just because I'd rather build up front, right? Bijan is an elite running back prospect, but you already have two young guys who do complement each other pretty well there. So, it's on the fence for me again. I don't want to commit to any one because I do really like Bijan as a prospect to the point where, if you did take him, I wouldn't complain because he is that good of a player. And he's that good of a player where if you pass up offensive line help for Bijan is the kind of runner who can create and kind of offset those offensive line concerns, right? So maybe you can get a right tackle in round 2 as well. So, there's a trade-off for every choice. If he's there at 16, I don't think it would be a bad move. I think it depends on who else is there, or if Christian Gonzalez is there from Oregon. He's my CB1. I would take him in a heartbeat, right? So that's another one where maybe you'd rather do that. But at the same time, this cornerback class is one of the deepest that we've seen in recent memory. Yeah. So there's a chance you can get a guy in round 3 or round 4, right? So there's a trade-off. There's an opportunity cost with every single option. Ultimately, I guess the closest thing I can give you to a conclusive, a definite conclusion is if you do draft Bijan, you got to make it right later by capitalizing on the value. If you don't draft Bijan, there are still good running backs later, but none of them are Bijan. So it's a tough situation to be in. But I think, whatever you do, you can make it right with the remaining picks.
Yeah, I could see Washington, and for some reason, I don't agree with it, but I could see them taking Robinson at 16. I don't think it's likely, but I certainly see them taking a running back in the draft. I think Washington have really subscribed to. I mean, really, if you go back in recent years, the mid and they've in fairness, it's worked out for them. That mid to later round running back kind of rotational guys. And I mean, that's just the value of the position. That's where we're going, right? I mean, you go back to that 2012 season, the most productive year Washington had offensively. 2015 was, but 2012, you had that Alfred Morris, right? In the sixth round, you had Rob Kelly follow up, and you just start going through the years, and you get the Antonio Gibsons, and you have the Brian Robinsons, the guys that are second, third, fourth, fifth round picks, guys that can find production there. But I want to piggyback off of something you said, and jump into what position you think. I know you said corner here, but what position is the deepest in this draft, and which one is the weakest in your mind?
Yeah, I think corner would definitely be in the running for the strongest. I think, I'll go with the weakest first, real quick, just so we get some variety here. But I think the weakest, hang on, there's actually a couple. Offensive guard or maybe safety. I think those are two that stand out to me. Safety mainly because I think, it's not necessarily a weak class, but a lot of guys are niche guys who are mainly nickel guys, right? So not a ton of field safeties, right, who can play in zone, and manage space, right? You're more looking at guys who, have the versatility to man guys up, but if you do need them to play, say single high or two high, maybe they're not as natural in that phase. So, I think the safety class is very unique in that aspect. Some teams are going to like it, some teams aren't, but that's where we're at. Like Brian Branch, the top guy for a lot of teams, he's primarily a nickel defender. Now, I do think he can go back in space, but, it's one of those things where the role is fairly defined for him right now. So you're gonna need some imagination if you want to move guys around. That said, I do really like the versatility that class provides. I think Sidney Brown from Illinois is a very good player. Antonio Johnson from Texas A&M, especially in 2021, had some very good film in the slot. You got Jartavius Martin, like another Illinois guy, but a versatile corner safety, right? So a lot of versatility, a lot of multiplicity. But if you need a traditional two-high, single-high safety, not quite as strong there. So that's going to be a complication. Offensive guard, the top two guys, Osiris Torrance and Steve Avila, those are generally considered the top two guards. Neither of them has a top 75 grade on my board. I like both of them for sure, but I don't think there's a first-round guard prospect in this class. I think both of those guys, Avila, not an elite athlete, and on top of that, there are times when he can kind of get locked up in the hips a little bit. There are times when he can kind of lurch over his center of gravity, a little too upright, get off balance at times. And then he can be a little late to pick up delayed blitzers and stunters too. So, I like him. I don't love him. Osiris Torrance, same thing with him. He came over to Florida from Louisiana. Just a massive blocker. I think he's around 6'5", over 330 pounds. So this dude is massive for sure. But with that comes a lack of lateral mobility and recovery athleticism. And I do think that his hands can be a little rough sometimes, get bear hug opponents at times. So I do think he got better as time went on, especially in the SEC. But neither of those guys are high level. And I think one could go in round one. That would be a little too rich for me. Avila, I can see it more than Torrance just because Avila has played both center and guard to this point. But both of those guys, it would be a little apprehensive for me if I was picking them that early. Joe Tippmann from Wisconsin could be a wild card. He played center at Wisconsin, but he has the versatility to play guard. I have him as my top interior offensive lineman. He's in my top 35, I think. So, I'd be down for him that early. But anyone else, a little too rich for me, right? Even in the second round, I wouldn't be apprehensive because of the scarcity of guards. You got to take those guys if they are available, right? Because the scarcity is going to drive the price up. But it's never a good position to be in when you're forced into that. So those are my two positions that are a little weaker. Corner, mentioned it earlier, probably the strongest position in the class. You've got the top end talent with Christian Gonzalez and Devin Witherspoon, Joey Porter Jr., Deontay Banks from Maryland, the hometown kid. He's insanely athletic for sure. Jacorian Bennett as well is another sleeper down the board. But even beyond that, there's so many names that I could bring up. Julius Brents from Kansas State, 34-inch arms. The dude's insanely long. 6'3", over 200 pounds, but he also tested as an elite athlete. Tyree Stevenson from Miami, Florida, around 6 foot, over 200 pounds, I think a near 33-inch arms. He's got 4.4 speed, great recovery speed, great technique at the line, really fast feet, but he's physical too. Jalen Jones from Texas A&M, he's a guy that gets drowned out sometimes, but he's around 6'2", 200, former 5-star who's very twitchy, very agile, it's very easy for him when it comes to matching guys, and he's very physical and run support as well. Corey Trice from Purdue, 6'3", over 200 pounds, very, very fluid for his size. I mean, transitioning upfield, not an issue for him. He tested very well. Super physical at the point, very good ball skills. Again, the coordination for him is top notch. Alex Austin from Oregon State, another guy who's super fluid. The off-man technique is what I love from his game. I mean, his feet are insanely fast. The corrective athleticism is incredible for his size, around 6'1", near 200 pounds, right? So I think not top-end speed, but a guy who can match anyone at the line. So a big fan of that guy. Keitrell Clark, Louisville. Travius Hodges-Tomlinson, some slot guys who are undersized. Clark Phillips III, right? So there's so many names, man. I could go on and on and on.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm curious because you can finish your thought, but I want you to add some context to a thought that I've had, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I have always felt like breaking down corners, defensive back, safeties is such a difficult task to do pre-draft. I have always found that certain skills translate in ways that you didn't see, and certain systems translate in ways that maybe we can't really see on tape. Would you agree with that corners and defensive backs are really difficult to evaluate? Or is that just me? And maybe why is that the case?
Yeah, I feel like it depends, right? Like it does depend on what they're asked to do. I remember Georgia, Darian Kendrick from last cycle was one who was kind of thrown in there, and he ended up not testing very well, so he kind of fell down the board a little bit. But he played in side saddle a lot in college, like a lot, where right off the snap, he's turning his hips inside. He's drifting upfield, right? Just kind of staying over top, right, with that inside leverage. And, in the NFL, you're going to be in situations where you need to man your guy up, right? Stay square at the line, use fast feet, not tip your hand, right? And you got to jam at the right time. You got to know when not to jam and when to turn your hips. You don't want to open too early, right? So, some guys are asked to do more of that at the college level. Other guys are asked to play, specifically in certain situations. Now, Keely Ringo, in Georgia this cycle, I think he was asked to play man a little bit more, right? So even the roles change in the same schools from year to year, right? It's never an immediate, direct reflection from year to year. But some guys are asked to do different things, right? So you got to and some guys are asked to do the same things but perform differently, right? Like maybe Joey Porter Jr. is going to be a little bit like he's got the length to really jam guys to the line, but sometimes he can get a little grabby, right? Alex Austin, he'll play and press, he'll get right up in your grill, but he's not going to use his length unless he's in proper positioning, right? So it's like every little thing, there's a ton of intricacies to kind of dive into. But I do think it's a tough position to evaluate because in man, there's so much to look at. You got to look at where their eyes are. Are they on the hips? Or are they on the helmet, right? You want them on the hips. How are their feet? How's their weight distribution, the timing, the reaction quickness, when receivers kind of tip their hand, and then in zone too, how early are they breaking? How's their back pedal? Are they tight on that back pedal? Efficient, right? So there's so many different factors to consider, for both of those phases. And even then, one rep might show something then different from the next rep. So it's one of those things where, corner is such a volatile position. You really need to make sure that you cover all your bases because there's a lot to take in for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. And you have Christian Gonzalez as your number one, correct?
He's my number one. Yep.
He's number one. Yeah, and that seems to be consensus there. Talk to me about, this is my favorite question I always ask you, and you're so respectful, and that's the best part about chatting with you. But give me the most overrated player so far in this draft, and give me the most underrated player so far in this draft. Now, I know you could probably give me 15 in each list. And quite frankly, give me the list if you got it. But I'd love for you to narrow it down to one guy that you think is being over-evaluated that you just don't see. maybe the Alex Leatherwood of this draft, as we might say, or somebody that's just not being talked enough about, and you're standing on the soapbox and ringing the bell for him. Who do you got?
It's tough, man. Yeah, I mean, I never want to say a guy's overrated, right? Because, one thing that I really try to adhere to as an evaluator is you need to say outcome independent, right? Like I can tell you that the guy's overrated, but what if he goes on and gets 1,000 yards as a rookie, right? There's so much that's dependent on, and that's not necessarily, maybe that's not a flaw in the evaluation. Maybe it's just he landed in the right situation. They used him perfectly for what his skill set was. There's so many different variables, right? So that's why I never try to stand on that hill and say, this guy's a bust, this guy's going to, because you never know. There's so many different variables. But if I had to pick an overrated guy, a guy who I think is maybe a little overrated in the NFL media. You see him go in round 1 sometimes. I don't see it personally, but Jalen Hurts from Tennessee. I have Cedric Tillman, his teammate, ranked higher than him. I do think there's a role for Hyde at the next level, right? I think his speed is the first thing that stands out. I mean, this guy explodes upfield very efficiently, effortlessly, right? He can stress defenses. You see all those screenshots of him, lined up against a DB who's got 15 yards of cushion off the snap because his speed is so dangerous, right? So that's like just kind of a visual representation of what Jalen Hurts brings to the table. And I do think that he can use stride variations, throttle control to use that speed and manipulate space against defensive backs. He's shown that he can use stop and goes. He's got good zone awareness. I just think right now he's a little too raw for me as a speed threat. I still think there's ways that he can improve that, become more consistent, right? He's got good hands. He's got good ball tracking ability, but I just don't know if he's I don't know if he's multi-dimensional enough for me outside of that speed, right? So I think, I would definitely take him on day 2. But if I'm thinking about round 1, right, I want a speed guy who maybe provides a little bit more. Maybe a Zay Flowers, who's a little bit better at manipulating coverages, right? Josh Downs, who's, incredibly consistent at, extending beyond his frame and converting for a smaller receiver. I would rather prefer those guys over a one-dimensional speed guy who, that speed is a very, very important thing. It kind of has gravitational effects sometimes, drawing defenders, kind of opening up one-on-one opportunities for other players. But at the same time, I need you to be able to create before the catch, create after the catch. If you can't do those things at a high level, maybe you're going to be a little bit lower. So, I would still take him day 2. The round 1 stuff is a little bit iffy for me. And then an underrated guy, oh, shoot, that's a tough one. So I got to think about the underrated one for a second. But there's a few names that come to mind for me. The first name that's coming to mind is, I'll go with Isaiah McGuire, edge rusher from Missouri. He's very productive these past few years. I think he measured in around 6'4", 270 with, I think, 34 in charms, near 34 in charms. A lot of the guys at the top of the class, Miles Murphy, Keon White, Tyree Wilson, Lucas Van Ness, Isaiah Foskey, they all have very good power profiles, guys who are, kind of that similar range, 6'5", 260, 34 inch arms, right? But Isaiah McGuire is also in that range. He doesn't really get talked about a lot, right? But he is very explosive off the snap, very twitchy as a rusher laterally. He can offset blockers very well for his size. And I think of that group, man, he's actually got very good bend capacity around the apex with bigger guys. Sometimes the concern is they can't sink, they can't, roll their hips, they can't reduce their surface area and use ankle flexion to work around the apex. He can do that. He's shown that he can use active hands around the apex too. There was a really, really impressive sack, I want to say, against Ole Miss last year, where he just kind of swiped around the apex, had a rip move, sealing a deal, getting the ice pick in there, and got the sack, right? His motor runs hot, strip sack. He's got the length and the violent hands to kind of convert in those situations. And then on top of that too, man, his motor runs hot. I'm a big fan of Isaiah McGuire because I think, he's got the upside. He's got a complete palette of traits, but he's also, operationally, you're not working from the ground floor. You're not working from zero. There is a functional arsenal of pass rush moves there. And I think that's a great combination to have. So a lot of edge rushers, man. Derek Hall from Auburn is another one who I think gets overlooked sometimes, but he's up there for me too. So this edge class is very fun. But Isaiah McGuire is the first one that comes to mind because I think his palette of traits is very complete. And on top of that, he is a legitimate pass rushing threat. He's not a project. He has stuff to work with.
Yeah, your latest piece came out. It was the top 10 edges in the 2023 draft. You can check it out again, profootballnetwork.com. Ian does a nice job at the overview ranking his top 10. All right, so I got a couple more here for you real quick. I'm going to get to what you think Washington does at 16. But I do want to ask you, because I only think unfortunately, it's appropriate here. The Raiders have proven an inability in all capacities to draft in the first round, really in the last 3 years. In just any capacity, they probably should not be allowed to draft in the first round. They should just get a break. But what I'm going to do for the Raiders here is I'm going to take that responsibility and I'm going to give it to Ian. Because quite frankly, I have not seen a team miss on more first-round picks quite the way. I mean, the Packers are desperately trying to take that trophy, but the Raiders just can't possibly do it. So I do want you to take the Raiders at 7. I want it to be Ian Cummings, the GM. What do the Raiders do at 7? And really, I know it's kind of a funny question to ask, but I desperately want them to actually pick somebody in the first round that does not have their fifth-year option declined or subsequently exit the league unceremoniously. So I'd like Ian Cummings, the GM, to make that pick at 7, just because I want the few Raiders fans we have listening to this to know that I do care about them. What do they do at 7 there, Ian?
What do they do at 7? Well, you don't pick a running back. That's one thing. I think, hey, Josh Jacobs is good, right? I keep him. No, I'm just like, you got to go with a premier position, I think, especially looking at that roster. That's a roster that, a lot of premier positions can be upgraded. I'll look at right tackle. I think they brought back Jermaine Illuminor, but, they can still upgrade off of him. On corner is another big area of need for the Raiders. So, those are two that stand out to me, two positions that I would look at. And if there is a quarterback there and you don't have to trade up, that's another option. You did sign Jimmy Garoppolo, but in my opinion, he's kind of, not much more than a bridge quarterback, especially in the AFC West, where you've got Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert, right? You need a guy with that top-end talent if you're going to go toe-to-toe. So, say Will Levis is still there, number 7. I wouldn't want him to start right away, right? But I think that's an optimal situation where you can get him in. You don't have to give up extra capital going up. And you get a guy with high-level arm talent, high-level athleticism, high-level smarts, IQ. He needs a stable environment to put it all together. So I think, that would be a good one too. But if Levis isn't there, if all the quarterbacks are off the board, I'll preface with that. If there is a quarterback, if Levis is there, I'll probably lean that way just because get that talent in the QB room. He doesn't have to start right away. Jimmy G kind of provides a buffer for him. I think that's a good environment for him to kind of get brought up, and he's got the high-level talent, right? So first off, we'll take that swing if it's there, the high-level talent at QB, because you need to swing for the fences, right? It might not work out in the end, but you're going to be it's going to be the same result as it would be if you rolled with Jimmy G and went 8-9 each year. You're not getting a Super Bowl ring. So if you're not going to get a Super Bowl either way, swing for the fences, take the guy with the tools and try and develop him into something. So I think I would go QB if he's there. If he's not there, then you're looking at corner and offensive tackle. And I look at Paris Johnson Jr. from Ohio State. He's one that's been a favorite fit of mine for the Raiders, specifically because he can play guard or tackle. He can play left or right. He's got the versatility to really line up anywhere of those 4 spots. And on top of that, highest ceiling in the class, 6'6", 313 pounds, 36-inch arms. He's got insane power capacity, incredibly explosive athlete, very flexible. His hands can be a little bit too wide at times. I want him to kind of work on that, but he's got great strength as well. I think he can be a little lopsided too, as tall as he is, but he is a road grader in the running game. And then the recovery athleticism is an asset in pass protection. So big fan of what he has to offer, especially with the Raiders who have multiple needs on the offensive line. He can line up multiple spots. I think that's a very good fit. Christian Gonzalez at corner is a good one for me. Like I said, my CB1, if he is still there, which I think there's a good chance he is, right? The Lions have a needed corner too, but we've heard that they like Devin Witherspoon for what he provides. I would consider Witherspoon if he was there for the Raiders, but Gonzalez for me, provides the highest level of size, athleticism, right? I think around 6'1", near 200 pounds, 32-inch arms. He's got very good recovery speed, very good explosiveness, but he's just such a smooth athlete too. Some corners you worry because, they're long, they have speed, but they're linear, right? They can't always transition. with Gonzalez, he is such an effortless transitioner. He's incredibly fluid, very, very agile, very flexible on his cuts, can sustain acceleration through transitions and direction changes, and managing space too, very smooth. He's got great eyes, he's got great awareness, and the ball skills too. When the ball comes his way, can extend beyond his frame, make the play at the catch point. Big fan of what he has to offer. Just from a composite standpoint, you don't see many guys as long as him who are as explosive, as fluid, as flexible. The ease of motion is what I like to use, but he's got it for sure. So I would bank on that. I think he can be a lockdown corner at the next level, and cornerback's one of the most important positions. We see it every year. You need to impact the passer, and a lot of people think of pass rush, right? But if you force the QB to hold the ball just a little bit longer, that might be all that you need for the pass rush to get home. So it's a symbiotic relationship. I think Gonzalez really supports that. So that's my top three for the Raiders. If the quarterback is there, you take that swing because you want to take that swing, bank on the tools. If the quarterback is not there, then I would go either corner or offensive tackle with Paris Johnson and Christian Gonzalez at the top of my board.
I like that. So if any officials of the Raiders are watching or listening, you got your advice. You can't miss. You can't miss. And if you do, unfortunately, we're going to have to blame Ian. I'm going to wrap this up with you for a final question for our Washington audience here in the nation's capital. Washington sit at 16, right? I've seen Joey Porter Jr. mocked. I saw recently today a possible trade up if Anthony Richardson starts to fall. Part of me wonders. I just can't see him falling, too far. But Devin Witherspoon, as a corner if he falls. I have some incredible tackles as well. But I think Joey Porter Jr. is the guy that I've seen most in terms of volume wise mocked to Washington. What do you got? I mean, what did the burgundy and gold do? This is you can say with new ownership, this is a lame duck year for Ron, but the reality is this is going to be a really, really important season for the Commanders and for the Rivera staff. So what do they do here? What 16, the card comes, and what do you think is going to be available? Do you think they move up? What do you got here for Washington?
Yeah, I think Washington is in a very unique spot because, again, it depends on how the board falls. And, we kind of talked about it earlier, like Bijan, if he's there, maybe he's the pick, right? But you mentioned it as well. What if a quarterback unexpectedly falls? Like, we're starting to see that with C.J. Stroud. Maybe C.J. Stroud falls. If he falls to a certain point, maybe outside the top 10, or maybe 10, right? Maybe you make a move up for him. As much as they've shown confidence in Sam Howell, Howell's not Stroud as a prospect, right? It's not even in the same category. So, if it got to that point, there is a threshold that if a quarterback passed it, I would be aggressive and make that move. But let's say it doesn't happen. Let's say they stay at 16. Joey Porter Jr. makes sense, right? I think especially for the scheme, this is a scheme where they like to rush 4, generate organic pressure with that 4-man front, and then use press man on the boundaries to delay releases, right? That's kind of what you're looking for, that combination. And Joey Porter's got 34-inch arms, right? He's incredibly long, incredibly physical. That combination, he can really do a great job delaying receivers at the line. And I think that fits well into what they're looking for. And he tested very well, too. So I think he's got that. I think on tape, the athleticism, the explosiveness in particular out of transitions, he doesn't always channel it to his full capacity, right? I think his testing numbers kind of inflate that a little bit, but I do think he has the length, the physicality, the disposition that you're looking for, and he's pretty fluid for his size too. He doesn't have elite fluidity, but he can transition well enough. If Christian Gonzalez is there, again, run to the podium, just sprint, just make sure you're not wasting any time. I think that would be a phenomenal value pick. If Devin Witherspoon is there, right? I think not as long as you're looking for in a press man, but he is a guy who plays beyond his frame. One of the most physical, chippy corners in the class. He can play the slot or the boundary. So, again, if Gonzalez or Witherspoon is there, you got to capitalize on that value. It's a little rich for Porter for me, but I would be willing to take it just because the scheme fit. Deonte Banks from Maryland is another one to consider. I think the size, again, the physicality. This is a guy who's got that dog mentality on the field. He can be a little more disciplined with his technique. Sometimes I think technically he's still got a ways to go in terms of refinement, but you're looking at a guy with elite explosiveness and recovery speed who's really transitioning, kind of, growing as a playmaker too. So those are the top options at corner. If I had to go somewhere else, maybe a right tackle, right? I know they signed Andrew Wiley. I think he could be a decent stopgap, right? He can play guard or tackle too, so we don't know where guys are going to settle out. But if Darnell Wright, Tennessee, is there, again, 6'5", 330 pounds. This is a guy who's got phenomenal power in his hands. He's got a mean snatch and trap at the line, but he's actually a very good short area athlete for his size too. He's my OT3, in that natural right tackle spot. I would very much like to have him there. Anton Harrison from Oklahoma, my OT2. If he's there, I would consider him, and I think they hosted him on a visit, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. But he's a guy who's 6'4", 315, great combination of natural leverage and proportional length, near 35-inch arms. I'm a huge fan of what he provides on the operational side. He's got phenomenal footwork. He can tempo his footwork up to match rushers, but he's also very combative with his hands. He's got independent hands. He's a great athlete too, so I think he really checks all the boxes. I would take him. I would heavily consider him if he's there. Those are the top options that come to mind for Washington. I think corner, offensive tackle, maybe Joe Tippmann if he's there, right? He will probably be there. I don't know if I would take him, but consider him as well because, again, he can play guard or center. And we don't know if Chase Roulier is going to, we know they signed Nick Gates, I believe.
Nick Gates. Yeah. Kind of like a Schweitzer-esque signing there, right?
Yeah.
For Washington. But that center position's never – there's some good centers in this draft?
Yeah, Joe Tippmann is my top one. I would consider him. He has a top 35 grade from me. It would be a little rich for him, but if you don't take him there, maybe the Giants take him at 25, right? And you never want to take a guy because you're scared that someone else is going to take him, right?
Yeah.
You never want to do that. But I do think Joe Tippmann, the upside is legit with him. He's 6'6". I want to say around 310, 315. He was a Feldman freak this past summer too, though. I think he had a 10-yard split in the 1.6 range, which is just absurd for an offensive lineman. Like, I don't think we realize how absurd that is. Usually the threshold that you look for offensive linemen to be starters, right? He's 175. And Tippmann was in the 1.6s at 6'6", right? So
remarkable.
He is explosive. He is powerful. He is intelligent as well. He really does a great job picking up blitzes. The leverage management can still be a little bit of an issue. The hands, still some room for refinement, but he's a young player. I would definitely consider him, right? I think if you want to upgrade that interior line, Tippmann is definitely an option there. But I think the top ones are corner, Gonzalez or Witherspoon if they're there, tackle, Wright or Harrison, and then there's a few others that are sprinkled in there, but those are the first ones that come to mind for me if you're Washington. I would steer toward the premier positions, especially because you have a defense that's fairly talented, right? You want to have a completing piece. And then Sam Howell on the other side. If you are committing to him, you need to make sure that he's adequately supported.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think Washington have they're really taking after their local NBA team where they're just the Wizards do this every single year where they just love picking between like 9 and 13.
Yeah.
Washington have found a nice little rental spot right there in between that like 14 to 18 range. But you got some options there, right? That's the secondary. I think there's I know Kendall Fuller's getting up there in age, but obviously he's still relatively productive, and I know they love Benjamin St. Juste in the building, and he's just got all the framework you want, young guy. That's also mid-round draft pick there out of Minnesota, lengthy dude. That's really what I got for you. I don't want to keep bothering you, but you've been so generous with your time. Anyone listening to this can realize and understand why Ian's just my favorite guest to have on here. Period. The guy just knows his stuff, and he's always great at coaching us up. You're always so generous with your time. Ian, again, Pro Football Network. You can find his work at profootballnetwork.com. It's IC_draft on Twitter. Ian, anything else you want to drop in there or promote for us?
I don't know. We pretty much covered everything, man. I'm just happy to finally have it on the what's the word? The home stretch, man. We're almost there. That's why. Yeah, it's just as exciting to see what the results finally will be after all this build up, but it's also exciting just to get a little breather at the end of it. You can probably tell, I'm talking so fast sometimes I need to take a step back and just go, Ian, you can stop talking for a second. Take a breath, man, I swear. But no, it's a fun time. Yeah, PFN365 on Twitter. Follow me at IC_draft. If you ever have any draft questions, feel free to shoot them my way. always happy to answer. But yeah, Conor, that's all I got, man. That's all I got. I think we exhausted our resources here. I think we're good.
It's the best, man. I would always rather the listeners drown in information than starve for it. And you're awesome and always so knowledgeable and so generous with your time. Ian Cummings, again, Pro Football Network. Dude, thank you so much for joining us. We will be in touch. We'll talk soon. And don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on After Further Review. Welcome back. After Further Review returns. Thanks so much again to Ian Cummings. He is he's the best. He's the best. Having good guests is so great on shows because in a way you can just sit back and let them go in. And he's so great because every year I hit him up, especially during the busiest time of his calendar where he's doing radio hits everywhere. Yeah, he's doing different things.
You mentioned before the show we started recording that he is he's getting some national attention first. I see why now.
Oh, completely. Completely. But he's just so generous with his time always. And always so, he was my first writing gig that I got at Fanside. He was my first editor. And so he helped me out a bunch with writing tips. And he's a tremendous writer, really good writer. But he found his niche with drafts and he just took it and ran with it. So big thanks to Ian Cummings. Again, it's IC_draft on Twitter. You can follow him. He's just tremendous. He has pieces out all week this week. So again, thanks to Ian Cummings. Shawnee, we will be back next week. And we'll do one more show before the draft.
Or it will be draft night because we record Thursdays. Night.
Yeah. Right. So we're going to have to probably find a little schedule situation. We'll probably talk about that and we'll update you guys on social media. But again, I want to welcome our YouTube audience. And again, I love our new studio setup. I love having the video. I love being able to interact with everybody. And so if you would like to watch our podcasts, you go onto YouTube, you just search After Further Review with Conor Forrest, and the videos are going to be up there. We have this episode that'll be up. We'll have last week's episode that was a little delayed. It was my fault. My email is just driving me nuts. So, but we'll have last week's episode up as well. And our episodes will be available on YouTube for everybody to watch at their leisure. It's fun. And I enjoy watching podcasts too. I enjoy that aspect of it. So I think you guys will enjoy it too. So I appreciate all the work Shawnee has helped put in to make the studio nice. And hopefully you guys enjoy it as much as we enjoy it. Because I just love this. And it's so fun. We've been doing this now for 2 years.
Started in, was it March of 2021? Was it March or
that's
April?
Ridiculous. We've been doing this for 2 years.
It's been a while, man. We're getting old.
We are getting old. I know. I'm thinking about retiring next year. But yeah, we've been doing this for 2 years, and having this kind of next feature on the podcast, we're able to get this on YouTube and get a video aspect. It's something I've wanted to do for a while, and just being able to do it is awesome. So I'm really excited about that. Also, last programming note. This week coming up, I'm starting a new series of Commanders-focused episodes. We have not narrowed down the name just yet. But here's the good news. You won't have to go anywhere. Wherever you get this podcast, you're going to get it. But it's going to be a 20 to 30-minute episode. It'll be probably just me. Shawnee can jump on whenever you want. But it's just going to be Washington football talk. It's going to be Commanders talk. And really, we're going to dive in and focus on that so that, during the After Further Review episodes, I'm not going on and bloviating for 45 minutes about a team that has done nothing but cause me unhappiness. But we're going to have guests on as well, and it'll be more of a Commanders-focused podcast, so Commanders-focused show. But it will be in the feed. It will also be on YouTube, so you'll be able to watch it there. But I'm excited to talk about a team and that has caused me a lot of pain.
I was going to say,
endless pain.
You sure you're happy to talk about them?
I'm not, but I will for our listeners.
Maybe I'll do a Patriots themed one.
You should.
Zappy Hour, Power Hour.
Yeah, okay. I just can't stand you. You're just the worst. This is coming from the same guy who lectures everybody on sodium and Zappy Hour. The cringe-worthy. Just the cringe. I'm gonna die.
No, we're going to come up with a good name for yours. He wants to incorporate Beltway or DC something in it, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Maybe people can tweet suggestions to you.
I like
There you go.
There we go. Maybe that's our latest Instagram poll.
I like it.
I like this. Get our listeners involved. This is why you're the executive producer, not associate producer, executive producer, making some decisions. No, but I think it'll be great. I think that'll be a fun aspect. So, first episode will be up next week. We're going to get into the sale of the team, and next week I'll probably touch on some draft stuff at 16, what we can do. But excited for that. Shawnee, am I missing anything? Am I out of my mind? Is there anything that I'm off on?
I don't think so.
No?
No.
See the slider?
Yeah.
You hear that music?
I hear the music.
That means we're checking out. Thank you guys so much for tuning in wherever you are. However you're listening, we appreciate you so much. Shawnee, it's so good to see your face.
Good to see you as well, man.
It's good to see you. We will see you next week. And do I have anything else? I don't. I think it's time for me to leave. My friends, thank you so much. We will see you all next week. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the other side.